What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the No Rain, No Rainbows podcast. So glad that you're joining us today. Thank you for your time. Now, if this is your first time listening to this podcast, to cut it short, it's all about life being hard, but it's worth the squeeze. We have to get through our storms to get to our sunshine and our rainbows. And this is a podcast about discussing some of the hard times we've been through and some tactics that we can maybe use to get through those hard times, or even simply just tactics we could apply in our lives to live our best lives. So joining me today, I'm excited for this interview. Help me welcoming our guest, Carl Sharperson, who is the author of Sharp Leadership, a book I've read maybe about a year and a half ago. Carl Sharperson Jr., thank you for the correction. Go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know where you're from and exactly what it is you do for our listeners.
Okay, outstanding. Yeah, my name is Carl Sharperson Jr. I'm a Leadership Innovation Strategist. I help people go from being mediocre to maximizing their potential. That's kind of what I do. Hailed from Washington, D.C., was born there. At the age of 14, moved to Spotsylvania, Virginia. Went to high school there. Decided to go into the Naval Academy. And after the Naval Academy, and played football there for 4 years. Then I entered the Marine Corps, became a pilot in the Marine Corps. Then I worked with several Fortune 500 companies, Procter & Gamble, Frito-Lay, Colgate-Palmolive. Came to South Carolina in 1999 as the vice president of manufacturing for Dunlap Slosinger, making golf balls. Worked for them for 1 year. My boss and I agreed to disagree. Then I started up my own business called Sharp Leadership, Overcome Adversity to Lead with Authenticity, which is my book. But Sharp Leadership is the business that I formed. And then about 8 years ago, I started doing professional recruiting also. So now I do a combination of all of that.
Wonderful, wonderful. And that's quite the resume. And I'm sure we'll be able to unpack parts of that along the way. Now, when you talk about pulling up the potential out of people, that has to come from some personal experience, I would imagine. And with all the accomplishments you've had, from the Naval Academy to the United States Marine Corps, even playing football through college, what are some of the big challenges that, as you sit here today, still stick with you, that's still a little bit on the surface?
Well, probably I say that my high school coach was the third most influential person in my life besides my parents. And I went out for football for the first time in the 9th grade and never played tackle football before. And my coach, Coach Sparks, gave a talk that I'll never forget. And he said, "You got your pads today. And if you don't want to play, turn them in. But if you come tomorrow, I need you to stay until the end of the season. Because quitters never win and winners never quit." He said, "If you quit my football team, you might quit school. Quit school, get married, quit your spouse. Have kids, quit your kids. Because once you quit the first time, then it's easier to quit the next time." So that sticks with me, and it's carried me throughout my life, the attitude of never quitting.
Yeah. I mean, and we could probably agree that quitting can become a habit quickly. And sticking through projects and finishing the things you start, that could also become a habit, which could be very beneficial for people in their lives. Has there been a time that you might have considered, even after playing football, after the lessons that your coach has bestowed upon you, has there ever been a time where quitting seemed like the only option for you?
Well, there's a kind of a double-edged sword with the quitting piece. And I'll give you an example where I stopped doing something, but I don't call it quitting. So I was the vice president of manufacturing for Dunlap Slosinger, and that's what kind of brought me to South Carolina. So I agreed to what I thought I was agreeing to, and then after about 6 or 7 months, it became clear that my boss and I agreed to disagree. So the environment was very toxic. So I decided to leave that environment. All right, so I don't consider that quitting. I consider that looking at the situation and saying, because I wasn't running from anything, unless you want to say I was running from toxicity and people not treating people right. Basically what was going on was the values of the organization and my values were not aligned, so I left that situation.
And I kind of want to press into that toxic environment and being able to, where you say you and your partner agreed to disagree.
My boss.
You and your boss. I think a lot of people sometimes find themselves in a position where they feel stuck. They feel stuck at work. They might be frustrated with how things are going, or they might think that their work environment is a toxic environment. However, they might not always have the tools or the resources available to them to walk away. They don't have the luxury to do so. if somebody's in this position currently where they feel stuck, what are some steps they can take to kind of take ownership of their lives and get to a position where they can walk away?
That's a great question. And different people have different thresholds. But one of the things I always do is I try to make decisions based on data. So I try not to do anything rash. So one of my things is if I'm going through something, I don't want to react to whatever's going on. I want to have a game plan. You know?
Yeah.
And sometimes you practice that game plan before it happens. So so if you come up with values that you're going to accept and not going to accept, and you run into it, you've already done the thought process of what's it going to take for you to leave.
Yeah.
So some things you can do is I always look at the pros and the cons, and you say, okay, I'm in this situation. What are the pros of it? What are the cons of it? And then you weigh that, and then you say, what's the risk? If I do this thing, what's the worst that could happen? You assess the worst that could happen. You assess the best that could happen, and then you make a decision. Maybe you get some input from some people, some valued resources that you value. Because the other thing that happens too is when you're in something, you can't see it. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how good you are. If you're in it, you can't see it.
Yeah.
Somebody from the outside, my kids from the outside can look at stuff I'm going on and tell me stuff that I can't see because I'm in it.
Yeah.
I kind of use the example of the frog. If you put a frog in some boiling water, the frog will jump out. If you put the frog in some lukewarm water and slowly turn up the temperature, you'll kill the frog.
Yeah.
So when you're in that situation, the heat's being turned up and you can't see it, so you can die on the vine.
Yeah. It's kind of like you can't see the forest when you're among the trees. You have
Exactly.
to have someone with an outside perspective really kind of let you know the environment in which you're in. No, great steps there to kind of go from where you are, and hopefully I love the pros and cons and really kind of putting it on paper, because I think I could relate to you on that, where I try not to make any rash decisions. I like to be proactive, not reactive. Set a game plan, really kind of map it out. And unfortunately, the harsh truth that some of our listeners are going to have to accept is this might be a plan that takes a year to execute. It might be a year before you can get out of that environment. But the beauty is once you start the planning process, it's no longer your permanent situation. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Let's talk a little bit about entering the Naval Academy. What are some of the challenges and some of the lessons that you were able to walk away with from that?
Well, the first one was I played football. I was the most valuable player of the football team my senior year, and I played offense and defense and made All-American teams. And my coach sent a recruiter to my high school. So I'm in class, and myself and two other guys get called to the office. We don't know why we're getting called to the office. And in walks this guy, 6'3", 230 pounds, blue coat, white shirt, blue tie, white cover. And he says, I'm from the Naval Academy, and I want to recruit you to play football. I didn't even know what the Naval Academy was, and it was 90 miles up the road, primarily because there weren't a whole lot of people that looked like me that were going to the Naval Academy. So the other two guys that were with me walked out. And I graduated from high school in 1971, so Vietnam was going on. So they said, I'm not going to Vietnam. So they walked out. I listened because my dad always told me, never turn down an opportunity that you haven't been offered. Always listen. So I listened, went home and talked it over with him, decided to go. Now, the requirements to get in the Naval Academy are pretty tough. We're talking 1,500 plus maybe on the SAT. We're talking 99% captains of some varsity sport, 3 sport athletes, honors, merit students, and just a well-rounded person, 20% Eagle Scouts. I mean, that's the kind of competition. So when I tried to get in, I couldn't get in because I wasn't competitive. My GPA was not competitive, and my SAT scores were not competitive. So they offered to send me to a preparatory school in Harlingen, Texas. First time I'd ever been on a plane, and I played football, and I learned to study for the first time. I didn't realize that when you study, you open up a book, you read. If you don't understand it, you read it again. If you don't understand it, you read it again. Because I had never done that. I had a 3rd and 4th grade teacher that put the love of math in me. So I was good at math, and I was good at grammar, didn't like to read. So when I came home in high school and junior high, I'd do my problems and go play or either work. That was kind of what I did. So I wasn't prepared. So I decided to go to the prep school. Then I got into the Naval Academy. Now, I told you what the standard was and the kind of competition was there. So I barely get in, right? So my first year, everybody takes engineering. My first year, I'm taking chemistry. after about 2 weeks, it seems like the teacher's talking French and I only understand English.
Yeah.
So I can remember I cried myself to sleep at night and I said, Lord, what am I going to do? I said, you know what? I'm not going to quit. So I went in and talked to the instructor and I said, I need some help. So he gave me some problems and talked it over for about an hour. I understood a little bit more, but not really. But I committed then. I said, you know what? I'm going to spend whatever time I need in chemistry. I spent more time in chemistry than all my other subjects put together. I made a B in chemistry first semester and a B in chemistry second semester. Okay, but again, that was the mindset of quitters never win and winners never quit.
Yeah.
So my goal was to graduate on time and not go to summer school, and I did that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, it sounds like, listening to this story, it sounds like there were a lot of firsts along the way. When you first meet this person for the first time, you hear about the school for the first time, preparatory school, first time on a plane. What is it like going into uncharted territory? And you even alluded to the fact that not a lot of people there look like you. So not only are you in uncharted territory, there's not too many people that you might compare yourself or familiarize yourself with that can help you, guide you along the way. How do you deal with the uncharted territory?
That's a very good point. Now, this is an example of how your adversity can help you through storms in the future or get to the rainbow. So when I moved from Washington, D.C. in an all-black neighborhood, moving to Spotsylvania, Virginia in 1968 as an 8th grader, during the same time period as the movie Remember the Titans. So my experiences were very similar. My head coach was white, sister coach was black. So the struggles of being called names and people not wanting you to be there and all this other kind of stuff, I went through that, right?
Wow.
So when I went through that, I developed a mindset of it's not what you call me, it's what I answer to. So some of it is developing a thick skin, keeping your head down, getting focused. So I was the only one in my classes there. When I went to the Naval Academy, I was the only African American in my company. But the thing is, if you're in any competitive environment, high probability you're going to be the only one that looks like you.
Yeah.
My kids, I have a 31-year-old son and a 28-year-old daughter. Okay, they were in high school. They were the only one in their class. You would think it would be different, but that's not the case. So I think that if you're in the military, you could be in corporate executive, you could be on TV, you could be any challenging position. It's a high probability that you're going to be the only one there that looks like you.
Yeah.
So then you got to develop the skills on how to deal with it.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So coming out of the Naval Academy and heading into the Navy, correct? You did a stint.
Marine Corps.
Marine Corps. So you did the stint as in the Marine Corps. With what you can divulge and what you could share, what was that experience like? And before anything, thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you. Another story about never quitting is, so at the Naval Academy, when you graduate, you have to determine what you're going to do. You could be a ship driver, you could be a pilot, you could be on a nuclear sub. So I decided to become a pilot in the Marine Corps. So the first day of ground school, the instructors tell you that the attrition rate is 66%, which means only 1 out of 3 are going to graduate
Wow.
a year and a half or 2 years later, right? So when I heard that, I looked to the left and I looked to the right and said, y'all not going to be here because I'm going to be here because Coach Sparks said quitters never win and winners never quit. So again, that was my mindset there. And I matriculated through, got my wings, and I did 2 6-month Mediterranean cruises flying off of ships. I did 1 3-month Caribbean cruise flying off of ships. It was in the Mediterranean, so we're talking Spain, Italy, Portugal, Africa, England, Turkey, all those. We probably stay in port for maybe anywhere from 4 days to a week. But I got to see a lot of the world and and I realized that when I came home to Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, I kissed the ground. I said, there is no place like America.
Yeah.
We got our problems, but there's no place like America.
That's wonderful, wonderful. So when you come back home and heading into the corporate world, I'd love to get the insight on how you apply the lessons you've learned through Naval Academy, through your service in the Marine Corps, applying that to a job. How did you benefit in the corporate environment? And I'd actually also be interested to know how it might have crippled some of your advancement in the corporate world.
Yeah, it's one of the things I think that happens with veterans is, and this doesn't make any difference whether you spend a year or 40 years in the military, you're in an environment where people tell the truth, people take care of their people, people do what they say they're going to do. So you grow up in an environment where there's a brotherhood and a sisterhood. Okay, so and when you leave that environment, it's different because you're in an environment where people lie, cheat, and steal, and throw you under the bus in a heartbeat. So it's a huge adjustment for a lot of military people just because of that. Because you could enter a company and you happen to run into a boss that doesn't value the same thing you value and end up leaving, go someplace else, different boss, same criteria, values. So you can bounce around and think something's wrong with you. So for me, fortunately, I entered Procter & Gamble in Albany, Georgia. Now, when I got there in 1981, in 1971, the company founded a plant there, a paper plant. We made tissue, towels, and diapers. And the leadership said, we're going to hire the same multicultural mix as the community. So the multicultural mix of the community at that point in time was 40% African American. When I got there in 81, 40% of the technicians were African American, 20% of the managers were African American, 20% of the managers were women. Unheard of in Southwest Georgia, one of the few places that Dr. King couldn't crack. Right? Yeah. So I go into that environment. There were a lot of military people that had prior military service. I think 20% of the managers in all of Procter & Gamble then had some type of military experience. Wow. So that was a good transition. And then one of the things I learned at the Naval Academy, which really stuck with me and I think served me well, was we called it the gouge. And the gouge was you had information, okay? So the value of networking, utilizing your people, getting information from other people to help you. You know, that's something that I think we as a people don't do a lot of. Yeah. But it is probably the most powerful thing that you can ever learn how to do, is to build relationships, get information from others, and not have to repeat, stuff that you don't have to repeat. So that was very valuable, the military skills, having the self-discipline to do what you need to do, using the network that I had, and being able to process information and lead people. Yeah. So all those skills were very applicable in corporate America.
Awesome. Now, I kind of want to fast forward to the book and the company, Sharp Leadership, because now this is what you've been doing recently is training other leaders and pulling out the best potential. How does Sharp Leadership come about? How does the book itself come about? Because I'm interested to know how you can comprise your life experiences through this. And I do want to reference something that's in the book as well in just a bit.
Yeah, I authored it about 2 years ago, not quite 2 years ago. And I had started doodling some things, and 8 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So when I was going through my cancer journey, I started documenting some things too. So my daughter called me one day and said, "Dad, are you serious about writing your book?" I said, kinda. She said, "If you're committed to writing your book," she said, "I found a book coach and I'll help you. I'll pay for the money up through the manuscript if you're serious about it." So with that, I got serious and contacted my book coach and decided what I wanted to talk about in my life, kind of put some meat on the bones, talk to her periodically. Now, she's 32 years old, so if a 32-year-old can understand what I'm saying, then that's good, because I know what I'm trying to say, but a lot of times other people don't know what you're trying to say. Yeah. So that was valuable, and what I tried to put in the book was the best learning / information that I could give about how to make it in this world. So it goes from 0 to almost death's door, and talks about, and throughout that, there's all kinds of trials and tribulations that occur. Yeah. Lost job, how to lose a job without losing your mind. You're going through stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer, having a brain tumor at the age of 33, integrating the school, being called names. So, it's I've had a 10-year-old read it. I've had a 90-year-old Naval Academy graduate purchase 10 books, 4 for his sons, 6 for his grandsons. Had a pastor use it as a Bible study. It's very easy to read. Got a lot of nuggets in it.
And as we were mentioning right before the episode, I've read it a while back, and even just sitting down and talking to you, there's snippets from the book that have stuck with me, and they continue to come back. So it does have a lasting impression. I want you to know that. I do want to talk a little bit about your bout with cancer, and some of the lessons that came about, because you talk about going from zero to death's door, and I feel as though for a lot of us. We hope to never come to a point where we have to face our own mortality, but I think there's a lot to be learned in that. And I'm interested to know what that journey must have been like for you, and what are some of the lessons that you still hold on to this day.
Okay. I've always prided myself in being healthy. I always exercise. Whenever I moved someplace, I found a place to work out. I ate right. So December 23rd, 2010, I go in for a routine colonoscopy. Doctor says everything looks good. I go to Florida to visit my wife's family, and my stomach starts hurting. I couldn't lay on my stomach, and I couldn't lay on my back. So I came back home and talked to the doctor. He gave me some pills. They didn't work. Came back a week later, gave me some more pills. They didn't work. Finally, he says, I'm going to do an x-ray of your stomach. So he did an x-ray of my stomach, and about 2 or 3 days later, he calls me at work. He says, Carl, I see enlarged lymph nodes in your stomach. I'm going to refer you to an oncologist. That's the first time I heard the C word.
Yeah.
I thought about 3 things. How long am I going to be here? Who am I going to spend my time with? And what am I going to do? Those are the 3 things that went through my mind at that point in time. So I went in to see the specialist. They did a bunch of tests. They did biopsy. They did CAT scan, PET scan, blood work, did all kinds of stuff. Took about 2 weeks. Seems like it took 2 years. And finally, they diagnosed me with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a type of cancer that manifested itself in my stomach. By the time I was diagnosed, looked like I was 6 months pregnant, face sunken in, arms skinny, legs skinny. I looked like one of them starving kids from Africa.
And this was over the course of just a couple months.
Yeah, because it was very aggressive.
Yeah.
Very aggressive. Now, my wife says that she saw signs a while back, but I didn't see them. But when it was diagnosed, it was very aggressive. Yeah. So I go in and talk to the caseworker and my wife, and I go talk to the caseworker, and my wife is crying, and the caseworker says, Carl, you can beat this, but you got to have a positive attitude. She says, you got to have a positive attitude. So, again, that comes back to quitters never win and winners never quit.
Yeah.
So I had 6 rounds of chemotherapy. During the time period that I was having my chemotherapy, several people poured into my life. So that's where relationships come in. I had a guy that I went to school with named Stan. Stan sent me a book called I Choose to Fight. In that book, it was about a guy named Tommy Harper who actually played football with me. He was a year behind me. And Tommy came in, and he played football. He's a tight end. He's a freshman, made his way all the way up to the second string. Michigan, we were going to play the Michigan team. And he'd been having some problems with his stomach, throwing up and stuff like that. So the doctor said, you're not going to be able to travel, and we're going to have to do emergency surgery on you. So they did surgery on him. He had testicular cancer. They gave Tommy 8 months to live, an 8% chance to live 6 months is what they gave Tommy. So Tommy's documenting what he's going through. This is in 1973. Yeah. Chemotherapy was basically sticking a syringe in your arm. Radiation was going to a dark dungeon, getting zapped. So that's what was going on in 73. So as I'm reading the book and he talks about what he's going through, I said, man, if Tommy can go through this in 1973, I can go through what I'm going through. So it gave me hope.
Yeah.
Tommy ended up living until he was 55 years old.
Nice.
Had 2 kids. They said, you're going to die in 8 months, and you're not going to have any kids.
Yeah.
So that positive attitude. So my friend giving me that book encouraged me. There was a lady up the street named Diana, and Diana was a 4-year breast cancer survivor. She called me. She says, Carl, I want to talk to you about something that I did. She called it her chemo walk. She said, while I was going through chemotherapy, I walked. Every day I walked. So I hadn't walked for a while. I got up and walked for the first time with a 14-year-old in the neighborhood, walked for a block. Next day, 2 blocks, kept walking every time until I went back. And while I was walking, when you spend a lot of time with yourself, either walking in the bed or something like that, it's an opportunity to have a bunch of negative thoughts in your head. So what I would do is I would recite one of 3 verses. I'd recite either the Lord's Prayer, 23rd Psalm, or the prayer of Jabez, and I would just repeat them over and over and over until that negative stuff got out of my head. And I did that while I was walking. this today, during that time period that I was walking, I can feel it, I can smell it, I can hear the birds, and it takes me back to that place because I spent a lot of time doing that.
Yeah.
So that was another person that came into my life. And then both of my kids did Air Force Junior ROTC. The Colonel Whitley, was the instructor. We became friends. My wife and I were having breakfast one day. We look outside, we see 3 people outside of our lawn, and all this noise. My wife looks a little closer, and it's Colonel Whitley and his wife Ann putting down straw, and a guy on the lawnmower cutting our grass. So Colonel Whitley paid for my lawn to be cut for an entire year.
Wow.
Right? Now here's the kicker. So when I was sick, not only was I sick, I was broke. Broke. I said, okay, what am I going to do? So I humbled myself, and I said, this comes into humbling yourself and being able to reach out to people. So I reached out to the president of the Naval Academy Association for my class, a guy named Kevin. Kevin reached out to a guy named Keith. Keith was in my company. Keith put together a GoFundMe program before GoFundMe was in existence.
Wow.
My classmates and alumni financially supported me for an entire year.
Wow.
The value of relations, some of which I hadn't seen in 30 plus years.
Yeah. Yeah. That's absolutely amazing because book I read recently called The Power of the Other talks about the importance of relationships and how humbling yourself to ask for help when you need it, and also having others to kind of lean on to at times is really the secret to one's success. So just hearing how all those pieces came together to prop you up and get you through that storm in your life is something that's absolutely amazing to hear. Kind of coming up on the end, my last couple of questions usually focus on the storm and focus on the rainbows that you're currently chasing. I do want to make sure I recommend the book to folks to get out there. I know it's available on Amazon. We'll get some of those details in a little bit. But kind of sitting here now, and you might have touched on it already, what's the biggest storm that sticks with you that you think moving forward you can take on any other trial or tribulation or challenge?
I think that the cancer storm is probably the biggest. And I'm a firm believer that trials and tribulations can make you a better person. Because there are things that I've done based on trials and tribulations that I would never have done.
Yeah.
Right. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about integrating the school, being the only one at the Naval Academy, and being the only one in corporate America. Right. So, I become the plant manager of a manufacturing plant in Kansas. Right. A union plant. First time I'd ever worked in a union plant. So I trained for a year, and then I get the reins. So I go into my office the first day, and I see this manila envelope on my desk. I said, oh, somebody's congratulating me for becoming a new plant manager. Right? I opened it up. There's 3 things in it. A hangman's noose, a picture of 6 white gentlemen saying KKK new employees, and a note that said, we don't want you here.
Wow.
So what I did was I called in the HR manager. I called in the operations manager and 2 or 3 other people, and I showed them what I had. And I said, I don't want you to do anything with this. I just want you to know that I got it. And then I went out and took care of business. We had the best results in the company's history in that manufacturing plant. Wow. Now, if I had not had that other stuff happen to me, I probably would have reacted differently. But what I knew based on experience was that person, whoever wrote it, didn't know me. They're insecure. They got issues. Hurt people hurt people. So that's an example of going through stuff that helps you through other stuff.
Kind of puts you in a position to kind of look at it with a different perspective.
Exactly.
And with that perspective, you were able to let the results and the person you are speak for yourself, not what they called you. Oh, I love that. So what are some of the rainbows and the sunshines that you're chasing now? What are some of the current goals that you've set for yourself?
I'm a simple man with a simple plan. So simplistically, that's the other thing that happens too is, so through my cancer journey, I tried to simplify life, right?
Yeah.
3 things: faith, family, and friends. That's what's important. So my role and goal now is to share the principles in the book and talk about the principles. So we're talking about simplistically 4 things. We're talking about never quitting. We're talking about taking care of your people. We're talking about building relationships, and we're talking about faith, family, and friends. So I really do believe that it's a life-changing book, and that's my vehicle to give back to the world. And I'm just trying to share those principles, monetize it,
Yeah.
share the word.
Absolutely, and I would love to see more people open up to your full story. And I know there's so much more to unpack than we could fit into this episode. So I think a lot of people are sitting on the edges of their seat, hoping for more. If they do want more, they could certainly get the book. What are other ways that people can reach out and connect with you, and maybe find ways to get the book themselves?
Yeah, my website is www.carlsharpersonjr.com.
Okay.
That's my website. You can just Google my name and I'll pop up. But if you go to the website, you can order the book also, and I'll sign the book and send it to you. Or you can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles. And you can also, I send out a motivational talk that's about 2 or 3 minutes once a month. You can sign up for that.
Yeah.
And get that also.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I guess before I sign off, what is the one message you hope that readers get from the book, or what some of the listeners right now to get from this podcast? What would you want to leave them with as they go about the rest of their day?
I would say that the other thing that I've learned through my journey, and cancer journey in particular, is people like authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see somebody across the table, you really have no idea what they've gone through, right? And being able to be authentic, the more authentic you are, the more authentic other people will be. And if you're authentic and you're real and you take care of people and you do all this other kind of stuff, people will gravitate to you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes you won't know what you've done or how you've impacted people until you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in an organization, left the organization, and then people say, oh, wow, I'm really going to miss you. Really appreciate what you brought to the party. And you just never know. So you just got to be authentic, be real, help people.
I love it. Carl Sharperson Jr., thank you so much for the time.
Thank you for your time.
Would love to get more knowledge from you in the future. But for folks that made it to the end, thank you for making it. And some of the key points that I wrote down was number one, don't quit. I love that. Don't quit and don't react. You want to don't make any decisions rashly. You want to have a plan if you're in a position that you feel stuck in. And moving ahead, you mentioned the gouge, right? The value in building relationships with others, gathering information and using it, because we can actually prevent ourselves from making the mistakes that others have made. And that can be a shortcut to our personal successes. So continue to build the relationships. And I love the 3 things you mentioned, the faith, the family, and the friends. Definitely something to live by. And of course, the positive attitude. That's something I'm all about. And with No Rain, No Rainbows, we're all about the positivity. So thank you for the nuggets. And I think folks can go back, listen to this episode again to get more value. But we appreciate you. And as we always say at the end of the episode, everybody wants the sunshine, but they don't want the rain. But you can't get the pleasure without a little pain. Let's grow.